Probably have to give it permission. And I need to remember to do this. You know, I think I actually forgot to start the webinar yesterday. So we won't make that mistake today. I'm going to take my own advice, which is to suck less. We're discussing this t-shirt in the windup here as we were getting going today. Once again, welcome to Close the Distance. This is the 3rd edition. I'm here with my compatriots, provocateur extraordinaire, Monica Nixon and Eric Garland. Good morning, guys.
Morning.
Bonjour. Et provocateur, c'est un terme que j'accepte pas.
My French is pretty weak these days, so I'll take your
Ouais,
word.
mais c'est ça, je me suis aperçu de ça, hein?
We'll see if we can get banned by YouTube's French edition platform. How about that? Nothing like getting canceled. So, the story behind the t-shirt is I picked this up a few years ago, and I wear it around regularly. And if
hopefully not that regularly.
Well, once a month, maybe, something like that. But if anybody comments on it, I usually respond with, well, it's just a suggestion. So, nothing personal. Anyway, how are you guys this morning?
Good.
Monica, you are looking fresh as a daisy from Sun Valley still?
I had 2 Trazodone and slept quite well last night, or whatever you called it. After much cognac and a hot date.
Wow. Right.
All right. We get it. Hey, y'all. Eric, Monica, what does intelligence do? We do truth.
That was the truth.
We do the real shit. Do we not? Do we do the real shit, or we do not do the real shit? What do we do, y'all?
It is the real stuff. Exactly.
Then let's fucking do it, baby. Let's fucking do it for the people. That's where I'm at this morning.
So, family show. Save the custom for when
Family's an F word here in Missouri. Go on, keep going.
Save the custom for when we go private. So actually, that is the live stream. We try and keep this clean, but when we turn off the live stream, you have to register for this webinar in order to get the good stuff, which is going to happen in private eventually after we cut the live stream to social. So stand by for that. Eric, I didn't greet you. How are you today? From St. Louis.
Oh, don't start with that. But hello. I'm well. How are you?
I am wonderful. So today is Thursday, the 23rd of December, 2021. Voltron is sweeping the nation very quickly with an R naught somewhere between 7 and 10, I'm told, about like the measles. And it seems that the vaccine, well, I won't, no comment on that until later. But Eric, you were about to say something.
I was just wondering if Monica was Voltron. That's all.
Maybe.
All right. Well, there we go.
Well, our topic for today, we did introductions 2 days ago. Yesterday, S was for social from our STEEPLED macro environmental control factor inventory, contingency control factors. Today's about tech. I've been looking forward to this one a lot since we kicked off a couple days ago. Technical. It was such a mystery, I think, back when intelligence and strategy and scenarios and futurists and all that sort of stuff was new and novel, that we had to make its own bucket because technology was defined as usually computer stuff. I think the real definition of technology from an anthropological standpoint, it's the way humans project power into their environment using artificial means. And so there's lots of different kinds of technology. mRNA vaccines are a technology, for example. Information technology is how most people define it. But for purposes of our control factor programming, we'll define it as the way in which humans project control into their environment artificially. So there's my opener. Let's talk. what's going on in 2022. That's, by the way, our focus for this little mini series.
Next generation nuclear. Next generation nuclear. The Trump people came in, they tried to give that to the Saudis. Turns out we already had that. We've got a global situation, and we can't do our nuclear stuff with the other stuff. And I'm not trying to be cute. It's hard to be more precise than that because there's some, issues that are hard to, be particular about. But we're on flying cars, but not flying cars. Jetpacks, rocket packs, but not that. We're at the technology is going to be your town will be powered by a nuclear reactor the size of your backpack. That's what people have been fighting over. So,
and I suppose projecting that forward, if you think of the miniaturization of those types of systems, if there's supply enough, I suppose our neighborhood might have its own nuclear reactor, which could power the neighborhood, right? Monica, I'll give you a chance at an opening salvo before I noodle some more.
Wow. Well, see, I missed coffee because I couldn't find the keys to my Lexus this morning, so I'm a little slow. I'm a little slow.
Chicken and egg.
Well, there's two things I thought we that I might be able to add to this conversation regarding the technology. One was the types of technology that has enabled things like what happened in that last election. Some of the tools that were ultimately developed in certain labs and universities and so forth, that I guess at the early inception, when I was looking at those technologies, for example, years ago when I worked for a very major tech company, it wasn't that advanced. And years later, after leaving that tech company, I worked for a small startup that had software. I think we discussed that. I discussed this to the degree that I can, to look how far it had come in terms of what it could do. Semantic indexing, demographic profiling, concept clustering. And then, you fast forward 10 years later, well, not even 10 years later, and then you see the Cambridge Analytical thing. When I was originally looking at that software, I thought, wow, this is really cool. For analysts like me, you're trying to figure out trends and seeing things and putting it all together. I guess I never really thought about its application as you saw it utilized. You guys are familiar with how the whole Cambridge Analytica thing went, right?
Vaguely.
And,
Eric, probably more so than me.
Yeah, Eric. Yeah, maybe Eric and I can kind of triangulate here, but I guess it never occurred to me when I was a younger buck, so to speak, that they would utilize that technology for that purpose, to be able to custom target propaganda. And I don't know why it should have surprised me, because it all involved behavioral profiling. So, wow.
Right on.
Yeah. So if you think about layering AI and this, that, and the next thing on top of some of those types of technologies, it gets pretty mortifying.
Mm-hmm. So I have a project that I am starting here in the new year, as you might not be surprised to learn, called the Academy for the DARQ Arts. Have I mentioned this to you? Have I mentioned this to you guys yet?
Is that Harry Potter?
No, not quite. So DARQ, D-A-R-Q, is short for the 4 general platform technology domains that I think will drive the future of information technology, specifically, and how information technology manipulates our environment as humans. D is for distributed ledger. So, blockchains and hash graphs and the whole concept of quadratic representations of equity and decentralized environments, NFTs being the sort of big trend example from 2021. My prediction for 2022 is that if NFTs were the tech of 2021, the DAO, the decentralized autonomous organization, will be the tech of 2022. A is for artificial intelligence, AI. We all know sort of that whole thing. R is for mixed reality. So virtual and augmented reality. And then Q is for quantum. And the whole nature of how these four platform technologies work together and interoperate, that's the thing that's really got me curious about it. In fact, one of the things Aurora WDC is doing in 2022 is we're launching an apprenticeship program called the ETO program under our Reconverge business, which is coming out of, it's being resurrected. I killed it in February of 2020 and because of the pandemic. And Reconverge is coming back in 2022 pretty strong. ETO stands for Elite Technical Operator. And one of the Elite Technical Operator designations will be an apprenticeship, a journey worker in DARQ architecture. So you will be able, if you're a young person or a person out of the military and you're interested in this, look up DARQ Architect in a few days, DARQ Architect, and you'll see some about what we're about to do with that. We're working with the state of Wisconsin actually here to register that as a formal apprenticeship program with 2,080 hours per year of on-the-job learning. And then we're building a side element of that with the colleges and universities around the Milwaukee area. So anyway, I wanted to share that with you guys because DARQ, I think, is the domain that we're going to have to navigate in the decade ahead, let alone 2022, to figure out how technology, as defined as information technology, to your point there, Monica, will affect not only strategic marketing, competitive intelligence, but our civilization and how it evolves.
Yeah, many, many changes with all those things in flux. That's for sure. And I'm no expert in all in those types of things, but I see exactly what you see. You're right. That is what's going to shape what's to come, without question. And you can see so many of the ethical concerns that have been generated over AI already, and how it's being utilized and how it's disenfranchising maybe certain groups. And there's been some public commentary on that. Oddly, I haven't had enough coffee to jolt my brain into remembering exactly a specific example. But
Eric, you seem to have an idea there pending.
I do. I'm trying to remember the specific example where AI had been utilized for some particular decision, and it was pretty disastrous how wrong it. Oh, hold on, it just came to me. It really does help if I've had 4 shots of espresso, doesn't it?
Uh-huh.
So the companies that were those housing companies that were buying and flipping houses, and the first company that kind of fell, which one was it? Not Redfin.
Zillow.
Yeah, one of them. And then the other two also started having the same problems, as they were using AI in certain markets to buy up houses, and they actually they got it way wrong. The variables that they'd plugged in the first place for their whole model, and you could just look at it and go,
no.
Oh, duh.
No.
Yeah. So it was like, okay. And then there's been more other examples, and it'll come to me in a minute, where they were using those types of technologies to look and group certain people, and they got a lot of things very wrong and pissed off a lot of people. And I'm trying to think, what was that? And yeah, it'll come to me later. But anyway, how wrong AI can be, and whether you want computers and that type of technology and algorithms, computer programs making important decisions about your life. I mean, that's pretty mortifying. And the second example that is just not coalescing in my brain right now, it will. I'm going to have to look it up through some of my notes. But yeah, it was kind of a very scary example of what happens when computers are making those types of calculations based on, little algorithms, and they're dramatically wrong. And that might affect something like the price of your car insurance. God only knows, right? In the future. Whether you're approved for a mortgage, God only knows. All the major things in your life.
So I was CEO of this company for 15 years before I read a book by a guy named Roger Martin, The Design of Business. I've talked with you both about it in 2009. And in 2009, I decided I can't do this anymore because of this dumb book. It described for me the process of design thinking. And I had never, again, I've led a sheltered life most of the time, despite having burned all my shame away in my 20s. The notion of design thinking is you drive mystery to heuristic to algorithm, and those algorithms are perfect. They are perfectly attenuated to manipulate the current reality. When the reality changes, however, you've got to go back to the top of the funnel, the knowledge funnel, and begin investigating mysteries again, which is the danger that I think you've just described for us, Monica, is that the algorithmic artificial intelligence, which governed the Zillow business model, was poorly attenuated for the new environment that was then plastered on top of it. It was perfectly attenuated actually for its old environment. And when the environment changed, the algorithm was wrong. And so anyway, an observation about your example.
A very astute one. So, right. I mean, I would love to sit down with some of the people there and see just what the variables were, where they were wrong. But I think it was that, well, once the money laundering started getting cut off, that might have been a problem. That one. I sound like Eric. But, as well as the fact that it was all these different companies that were bidding it up with each other. And wow, okay. Somebody was going to get wise to that at some point, and it was going to have some issues.
I just want to hang out on, I sound like Eric.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, you're right about the whole thing.
I'm a bad example.
No, you're a good example.
Of good things.
Yeah, so this housing thing, I mean, and how they utilize some of this stuff for it. It boggles my mind that whatever they plugged into these things, that economic reality on the other side, once you create a bubble of that magnitude, right? Have they ever been sustainable? Obviously, there's a point where that bubble gets pricked, right? And where there's just lunacy. And obviously, these guys didn't calculate that, oh my God, all of a sudden we're driving housing up 40% a year. Pardon my French. We're on
family show.
It's family show. Yeah, it really stuns me for these people who should have the economic background. They had to have known it was a bubble, and they didn't cross-calculate that them playing against BlackRock or Innovation Homes or whoever else, that it was them doing all the bidding up, and at some point, the game was going to get even too rich for them. Nonetheless, the variables on the downside, if you're buying to rent or something like that, and they try to take 33% rent increases, what did they how did they possibly think that was going to play with people with flat wages, and that being the biggest component of what people pay? Yeah, I mean, I sit back and I wonder what they plugged into that thing to think they could keep driving this. That's just wow.
So I have been studying something lately. It's not new. In fact, Craig Fleischer tells me it's from the 1960s.
Okay.
But the notion, I think it was a guy named Rogers, Craig would tell you. And Rogers came up with this thing called the adoption curve. And the adoption curve basically dictates that the diffusion of innovations will force the plateau of an innovative technology through its S-curve at the point at which you reach 50% adoption or thereabouts. And so this graphic, this is Forbes, by the way, so good job, Forbes. Everybody go see their website if you want to read this thing. But this notion that you have innovators, that first 2.5% or so who are truly out there doing new things. I'll use Bitcoin as the example because I think it's a really pretty good one. Distributed ledger, as exemplified by Bitcoin, the cryptocurrency, the original cryptocurrency, and the notion that there is 21 million Bitcoin. Each of those Bitcoin is divisible into 100 million Satoshis in honor of its, erstwhile nom de plume, Satoshi Nakamoto. And that liquidity is finite. That was a very disruptive idea. And that those initial early innovators, that first 2.5% that jumped on that bandwagon, didn't know that it was going to succeed. People were using Bitcoin for all sorts of things. And the famous, I don't know if it's apocryphal or not, but buying a pizza, with your Bitcoin, and you spend a couple of Bitcoin to order a pizza based on the float of wherever Bitcoin was at 10 or 12 bucks or whatever that exchange rate was. That now has turned into, of course, a roughly $50,000 asset class, where a single Bitcoin has been trading between about 40 and 65 or thereabouts $1,000 US dollars here at the end of 2021. Now, of course, there are thousands of cryptocurrencies that have emerged in the last few years. I think 2018 was really the year of the ICO. I want to say there's something like 15,000 tokens out there, many of them fungible to fiat currency. Many of them non-fungible, and they're utility tokens or collector tokens. But I'm very, very interested in the power of distributed ledger, not from the Bitcoin perspective per se. Gary Gensler, the chairman of the SEC, has said that Bitcoin is the only cryptocurrency that is not considered a security by the federal government, which is a very interesting statement to make. And I find that sort of statement indicates to me that we've made it not only through innovators, we've made it through early adopters, and I think we are well into early majority on a technology like Bitcoin and the broader general platform technology of distributed ledger. I think the innovation, in other words, of that particular technology will start to crest in the not too distant future as the early majority, late majority, and laggards eventually pick up on that technology. Now, I use this example because it's now kind of how my brain works. It's how I evaluate technology. And I used my buddy Dave Conley, who I mentioned the other day, was a part of the original Close the Distance in 2020. His whole notion of the 4 stages of the S-curve, that you are stage 1, the technology is pretty crappy. It's not very good. It's not good for much. And then eventually you realize what the performance definition is that the market will reward with share. In other words, you're down here in early adopter land. Early adopters eventually tell you through the telegraphy of their criteria what you need to do to improve your offer, your technology stack. And you begin to climb through early majority. This is stage 2 of that S-curve. When the S-curve begins to crest into stage 3, that's when you're really getting penetration. The market is absorbing and has absorbed the technological implications of what it was you were doing. Social media is a good example of a stage 4 technology today, because stage 4 means it's starting to degrade as the S-curve is crested. So I want to use this construct a little bit as a way for us to understand how adoption of innovations, technology, is specifically the mechanism that we can observe, the observable process by which those innovations are absorbed into a market. And there again, I'm just trying to kind of get us into this technology conversation, because we're gonna have many more examples and opportunities to talk this through. But I'll leave that on the table there for you two to respond to.
Well, I live that every day as I've worked in tech. So from both sides, the creator side working for, with HP Labs, right? And the other side as the consumer of technology as well. So it's a very solid framework to look at these new technologies with. But I mean, when we talk about something as well, and this is where my little brain, I used to work in laser printers, right? But when you talk about something as significant as an entirely new means mechanism of exchange, money, making things digital, the central banks, all the stakeholders and all this, to me, it looks a lot more complicated than the traditional technology that I used to forecast. Where's Xerox's next printer going to be, or Lexmark or whatever? Are they going to switch from DEP technology to page-wide inkjet? This is a very, very different and more complicated thing when we start talking, like you say, the ledger, social adoption, how Bitcoin and generating it, mining it. It's a hard thing, and I have nowhere near the depth that you do, Eric, on it. So, but then I look at all the pushback that you might get over the people that want to protect the current system too.
Right.
So that's why I think those models, like the one that you laid out, that's been ingrained in my brain since I was 28 years old and started doing, and understanding how people adopt technology. It is what the big companies, utilized as a back framework for looking at, right, like you say, technology adoption. We had slightly different terms that we might have put on some of it, Early adopters, you got that right. Then it's ramping, then it crests, then it declines, and it's a cash cow market, right? So, but yeah, this one is, in my view, a lot of other variables to have to look at. I mean, just like you say, the steep analysis, all that really lays into how all this is going to play, because it is complex, I think, for common people to understand. It's not like, well, here's my dollar in my hand and I can earn it and they put it in my bank. We know how this system works. For people to grasp how this whole Bitcoin, digital currency, distributed ledger, all that stuff really works. I mean, I've always considered myself a techie, but I've got to say on this particular thing, I probably have 1% of the knowledge that you have.
So here's actually, I read something really interesting a couple days ago from a newsletter called Bankless, and subscribe to it. I've started following these guys, and they're really, they're smart young punks they will teach you, not me. I'm not going to teach you much about distributed ledger. Bankless will teach you everything you need to know. But they had a piece, and I don't remember who the author was, but it was a contributed piece on the Internet of Jobs. And the hypothesis of the piece was that distributed ledger technology will go mainstream, so to speak, when the job that you do that day is represented on chain. In other words, I have a job for the day or for the hour or for the next 5 minutes, and that job is paid in crypto. I'm getting paid through a fungible token system that allows me to turn that back into money that I can use to live. And so I was having this conversation with another entrepreneur a few weeks ago, and the conversation centered on that first 6 months, groceries cost money. You got to be able to put food on the table for your family, or you'll quit and you'll go get a regular job, so to speak, regular job. So his hypothesis is the Internet of Jobs, when the Internet of Jobs crests over a population, particularly a population who's just told us socially, social was yesterday, S is for social, T is for tech. And when that population tells you that they don't like their jobs anymore, they're done. It's meaningless work for the majority of the people in the workforce. And now we've given them a tool set that enables them to find a means of income in a decentralized way. That threatens the relevance of the nation state at that point. And that actually was where I wanted to take us after social yesterday, because I think that's what technology is. Those are the consequences of the DARQ agenda. DARQ draws into question the relevance of the nation state. It makes the nation state obsolete because now the power is manipulable at the individual level. So anyway, Eric, you look like you've got a lot to say on this, and you've been uncharacteristically quiet. I'm going to call on you. Have you fallen asleep? Did I put him to sleep?
Maybe. Where'd it go? No, the other point, Eric,
I think he's pretending he's frozen.
No, that's a really good point that you just made about, people being able to make their own money, maybe not also being beholden, one of the backdrop things that we see going on, and, that if you ever listen to Klaus Schwab or whatever his name is, Schwab, the merger of corporate power, government power, this, that, and the next thing. Right. People can make their money. People can control their money themselves. Think about the loss of power and control, and right, how we even think about how we work and jobs. And what if all of a sudden people like me or Eric or, well, you don't anymore, you have your own thing, but we don't work for major corporations.
Yep.
Wow. Yeah. It's kind of mind-bending, isn't it? Because that feeds into what you were just talking about. What gives these people their power in the nation state as it is today? Yeah. Wow. Right.
And really, that's why I put STEEPLED as the easiest way to interpret the uncontrollables. Technology is not controllable. We think it's controllable because there's an inventor. There's an intellectual property process. And I think that horse is out of the barn now with decentralization. Decentralization as a phenomenon means that you will have a really hard time as an authoritarian, to yesterday's conversation, you're going to have a really hard time putting that genie back in the bottle. And it'll get worse. It gets a lot.
Yeah. Hence why things are so terribly contentious right now.
Right.
For people, I think people like you and I see, maybe your average person does not, but we sense inherently that massive sea change that's going on. We see it. We feel it. It's like, it's magnanimous.
Smurfly.
Smurfly. And maybe things will suck less. Well,
that's what technology is for, right? Technology, whether it was the wheel or fire or, shelter, all of these things were innovations that eventually the whole human race adopted because they wouldn't survive without it to reproduce, by the way.
We can't keep surviving the way that we have been, where you've got this amalgamation of all the money and this, that, the people who've learned to play this game, like we've talked about, all this economic insanity, bubble creation, so much money in so few hands. More concentrated, like you were referencing the other day, and I'm aware of as well, the degree to which that all that's going to break down if this, like we say, really normalizes, becomes the more prevalent paradigm. Yeah, it's wow.
Well, on that note, Mr. Garland, any remarks?
Mr. Garland. Where did he go? Do you see his video? I don't see his video.
Oh, I do. I was wondering if he was frozen there for a second. He's coming around.
Okay.
Eric, what's on your mind?
Listening. That's our thing, right? We listen.
Oh, listening. Got it. You're a little far from your mic, but I heard you say you've been listening.
Sorry.
Awesome.
Yeah,
There he is.
There I am. It's about being involved in the change. Can't be an Intel analyst without it, certainly, or anyone else, really. So,
yeah, words of wisdom. I think that's the thing that people are so, I'm going to say scared about right now, is that seemingly these things are inexplicable. And that's not true. It's just inexplicable to them for the moment. Right?
Well, there's a high degree of complexity and understanding, I think, even something for people who are non-technical, like what a distributed ledger does. If you don't understand finance, if you don't understand economics, if you don't understand the current central banking system, where money comes from, how it's created, what fiat is, what that really means, right? How do you wrap your mind around this?
Yeah.
You don't. Your average person who doesn't have an MBA, MFA, hasn't been in big corporate America, hasn't been in a think tank, or all these other things that constitute the world that we live in. I hesitate to say your average Joe, but because it's a dramatic oversimplification, but I think you guys know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah. So they used to be Joe Sixpack, the guy who buys a six-pack, right? relax and go back to work the next day.
Right. So what does he know about fractional reserve banking? What does he know about structured finance, which has got us in so much of the trouble that we have today? What does he know about CDOs, CLOs, all these esoteric, financial SPV vehicles, all this financial crap that we have come up with in the last few years, derivatives, whatever, that this is going to change so much of that.
Yeah. Well,
maybe it's going to make the playboard cleaner. I wonder about that.
It's going to make it a lot more transparent. I'll tell you that. So the coolest part, I think, of distributed ledger and what really the original Bitcoin blockchain taught us is that when you make transactions observable but anonymous, the observation of those transactions become more trustworthy. It kind of doesn't matter who's behind it, which is sort of why organized crime thought Bitcoin was a tremendous, way in which to transact business. And I think there were, really those innovations diffused to those early adopters and innovators, very quickly. However, I think the majority, that early majority, is discovering that this thing is a store of value on par with something like gold, as an asset class. And as an asset class, as crypto has sort of proliferated, you have second generation blockchain technology in the form of Ethereum, which is much more efficient than first generation blockchain on which the Bitcoin system operates. And Ethereum has found that it's less of a store of value and more of a store of transactional benefit. So if I can design a system that uses smart contracts to take human frailty out, there's no more human discretion because we live in a zero trust world. That technology enables us to cope with zero trust. I don't have to know who's on the other side of that trend. I don't have to know who is hiring me to go out and do an analytical exercise. All I need to know is that they've got findings that they're trying to discover. And as a result of those findings, that will equip them as an actor to do different things. Now, of course, that sounds like a shockingly dangerous innovation, doesn't it? If I don't know who's hiring me to do things, my word, it could be
enabling. Yeah.
It could be anyone. It could be Vladimir Putin, for crying out loud, if that's what it takes. And I think that's where government is trying to find a way to put that genie back in the bottle. And I don't know that they can. Now, I'll use the example of the Colonial Pipeline cyber ransomware situation, which was maybe, I don't know if it was 6 or 8 months ago. It was the end of December 2021. It was earlier in 2021. And I think it was 5 million in Bitcoin that they ransomed that back for. I believe they paid the ransom, and I believe the Justice Department got them back a good portion of what they used because the ransomware was paid in Bitcoin. Now, that actually is what crashed Bitcoin last summer. And my hypothesis behind the Bitcoin crash earlier this year was, I think it was in August that story broke. I thought Bitcoin was anonymous. I thought you couldn't trace me as a result of me doing in Bitcoin. And in August, the Justice Department got Colonial back most of their money, which means they figured out who had it. They figured out who those keys belonged to, whose wallets were those. And so, in other words, blockchain
not as anonymous as you think. That's exactly right.
Exactly.
See, I always now you're into the area that I do understand coming from the cybersecurity side, and where I have to be very careful in the conversation.
Yeah, and I won't ask you to violate any confidences or covenants, Monica.
I know that, but that's something that I always knew. Okay, because the banking, let's just put it that way, that I kind of delved into, doing what I do. And it was like, it was more than apparent to me that there was no way that anything digital doesn't have a footprint somewhere, sweetie.
Yep.
So that was one of the big, if you want to call it fallacies, falsehoods, whatever, that I think that everything was, non-discoverable, anonymous. much like when you started seeing, I'm going to reference back to this, the creation of some of those analytical types of tools, and so forth. And they were saying, oh, you're not going to be identifiable in all of our profiling. And behind the scenes, and again, okay, certain groups of people that could re-identify people. There's actually numerous white papers written about de-identification, data mining, all this kind of stuff, and how it can absolutely be done. And you and I touched on that a little bit the other day. So none of this is quite as anonymous, I think, as people might like to think, is what we're kind of circling the wagon back around to.
Yep. So here's my prediction. Sometime in 2022, someone, maybe it'll be us. That's there again. I have to, whenever forecasts are made, I'm careful to not call it a forecast because it's really an estimate. It's a guess. Sometime in 2022, someone, maybe us, will develop a system for pseudonymity management. Thinking of it as meaning pseudo-anonymity, if you prefer that nomenclature, that I have many different masks that I wear as a human. I wear a different mask when my family and I are waking up on Christmas morning than I do when I'm doing a live stream with a couple of my intelligence OGs.
Do you realize how big what you just said was in the context of what we're talking about? Banks, governments, nation states, you see this massive impetus for the more surveillance to know anything and everything about you, IoT feeding further into that the concept that you just nailed it, how that would strike such fear into these people who are so 180 degrees diametrically opposed, entirely onto this total surveillance, your money, even being able potentially to impose negative interest rates at some point. What you just talked about is so 180 degrees in the other direction.
Scares the living poo out of them. Family show. Yeah, I would concur with that assessment. And somebody's going to do it though. I mean, I think it's inevitable. It's inevitable if we want to have anything like the privacy we thought we enjoyed in the before times.
I love you say that, in the before times. Yeah.
Well, guys, this is awesome. And, believe it or not, we've had as many as 20 people watching this live stream on YouTube. So for those of you on YouTube out there, I'm going to do that really tacky thing that YouTubers do. And I'm going to say, like and subscribe to wherever you're watching this. Feel free to share it. Comment if you like. We'll be back here again tomorrow. You guys good talking about economics tomorrow?
Oh, that one's going to be a real barn burner, isn't it?
All right. So S is for social, T is for tech, E, the first E, is for economics. Eric, you good to talk about econ tomorrow? I'm going to guess that. I'm going to take that as a yes. So with that, Monica, Eric, thank you guys for joining me again to close the distance here today. Have a wonderful, what is today? Thursday, December 23rd, Christmas Eve, we call it around our house. And I hope you all have a fantastic rest of your Thursday. Thanks for starting it with us. And we'll see you back here for the Close the Distance Dawn Patrol tomorrow.
Thanks, sir.
Go get some powder, Monica.
Oh, I'm going to go get some coffee. Thanks, guys. Catch you later.
All right, guys. Talk to you later.